This is the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast. Here's your host, Corey Tusick.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. On this week's episode, I interviewed Luke Mikic. Luke and I met on Twitter Spaces over the summer, and we've been going back and forth, and he's got a good following and a lot of knowledge. So I wanted to have him on the show. And in the show, we talk about, are we on the eve of a hyperinflation scenario? What does he thinks the world, is going to be vastly different in 2025, and we might see Fiat collapses and all that kind of stuff. So we get into all that, and then also a little surprise thing, something Luke and I had been talking about for a while, but we're going to be adding Luke to the Bitcoin Made Simple, basically, podcast network, and he'll be a partner with me in this. And so he had started doing his own podcast, but he was putting on YouTube only, and we thought of it. We had talked even before then about doing something together. So he's going to bring his show actually to this channel. So when you guys go into the channel and look at the episodes, you'll still see my interviews, which will they'll all vary. I mean, we kind of bring different energies, but there's a lot of synergy between us. So you'll still see my interviews. They'll be titled BMS, number, whatever. Like this one is BMS 037, and it'll keep going up from there. But Luke's will be Fix the Money, Fix the World. So it'd probably be something like FTM, 01, 002, all that kind of stuff. And that way you can differentiate, but you can get both of us in one place. And then also we're going to do a weekly recap episode together, just like the past week in Bitcoin, all kinds of current event topics where we can just kind of BS and go over everything for an hour. So I'm really hoping that you guys will like that. Luke is a wealth of knowledge. He's very entertaining to listen to, so I think he's going to be a great addition. And this first interview here, I think you guys you'll really like him, and it'll be great to continue this going forward. And hopefully it gives you guys more content, because I know everybody is looking for more and more podcasts and more stuff to listen to. And I don't bring the knowledge, but I bring other people on that bring the knowledge. So hopefully it's helping you guys learn more about Bitcoin as I learn about it. Today, the show sponsor is Coinbeast Connect. Do you have questions about Bitcoin? Personalize your learning and book a one-on-one video call with a Bitcoin Pro on Coinbeast Connect. Learn about mining, security, the Lightning Network, DeFi, taxes, and many other topics. It's really easy. Choose your topic and pro, select a date when you're available, and bring your questions to the meeting room. Book your first call today by going to coinbeast.com and clicking on the Connect tab. Be prepared for the financial revolution and get the knowledge you need. It's also brought to you by Movies Plus. Movies Plus, you've heard me talk about my movie platform. The streaming platform's live. It's available in all the app stores. So if you go in and search for Movies Plus, you'll find it. And then also, if you want to do a free trial, go to the website, mymoviesplus.com. You'll be able to sign up for a free trial for a month and give it a try. Let me know what you guys think. We have hundreds of titles up there, soon to be thousands. We're adding more and more by the day. We're working on a lot of Bitcoin content, so I think you guys will like that as well. But we also have a lot of just general content that you can't find other places. We have banned content, stuff that other platforms are not are too afraid to put on. So I hope you guys check all that out. And if you want to get in contact with the show, it's at Bitcoin Simply. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Corey_Tusick. I switched it up, so it's at Cory_Tucek. If you want to email the show, it's Bitcoin Made Simple Podcast at gmail.com. Thanks. So the movie lighting, is it freaking you out a little bit? Like I didn't even do this on purpose, but it is, since you're in Australia and I'm in Pittsburgh. It is the middle of the night for me, basically. And so yeah, I got out. I was like, ooh, I could do it on the back porch. It's still nice out. And as soon as I pulled the zoom up, I was like, it was pitch black. And I was like, oh shit, that was dumb. So then I put my flashlight on, and now I have this like movie lighting, which is perfect for October. Like
I love
here
it.
we, uh,
Halloween's on October, and you can get the torch light up, mate. You can tell us some creepy stories. It'd
oh yeah,
be really good.
dude. The word torch that you guys and the English use for flashlight, like throws me off so much. I'll never the first time I went to England, me and my wife stayed in this like nice countryside bed and breakfast right near where the Downton Abbey castle is. And and the old lady that owned the bed and breakfast, like she was like, so helpful, and like she was just a jolly good lady, all that kind of stuff. And she she's telling us like, oh, like we were going down to this place called the Ye Old Pub, and or no, the Yew Tree Inn. That was that night. And she goes, oh, like she's like, it might be a little dark when you get back, so let me get a torch for you. And she like walks away, and I looked at my wife. I was like, a torch? Like, are you kidding me? It's like, this lady's getting a torch for us.
She's gonna set it on fire, baby.
I know. Like, I mean, I seriously, and like the whole time, my wife, she knew, 'cause she loves England and London, and so she knew, and she was just sitting there looking at me like, yeah, it's a flashlight. Like what? And like, but like she didn't say that. So the lady comes back. I mean, this whole time, I'm waiting for this lady to come back with an actual torch that like I'm gonna light and like be walking back from the pub like with this big torch, as if like because I went to Europe, all of a sudden you're in this like the dark ages and like you have torches.
Yeah, the medieval dark ages. The
Yeah.
medieval dark ages of central banking. That's what I call the 19th century. Neo-feudalism.
Yeah, that's really where it started, isn't it?
It's a nice comparison. I like Dennis Porter's coined after the Bitcoin era, the modern day Renaissance. So kind of the neo-feudalism age was your kind of dark ages. And then obviously you had the invention of the printing press, separated church and state. And now it gave you the Renaissance. And now we've been living in the modern day dark ages with central banking for the past couple of 100 years. And now we're going to use another tool in Bitcoin, which is akin to the printing press. And we're going to separate money from state. Modern day Renaissance. I loved when Dennis made that comparison. It really makes you think.
That's a great comparison. So you're what's your we'll get into that, but first of all, what's your background? And for the audience that doesn't know Luke Mikic, from Australia, mate.
Down under, mate.
Yeah. If you haven't been frequenting Twitter Spaces, maybe you don't know him, but he's pretty well known in those spots. And he drops some knowledge bombs on us left and right. So give us a background. How did you get into Bitcoin, and what's your background? How'd you get into this position?
Yeah, so I'm just another Aussie bogan. And I think I was studying at university 2016, 2017, never heard about Bitcoin. Wasn't really that interested in macroeconomics or finance or anything like that. And then I think I heard about Bitcoin. It must have been at the very peak of 2017. And I can't remember where it was. I think maybe it was on the radio in the car. And I was like, that sounds really interesting. And I looked into it a little bit, just a little bit late 2018. And I kind of came to the realization, I was like, wow, this has the potential to be big. And at this stage, I was still, quote unquote, crypto curious. I was still in the shit coins for about a year or so there in 2018, 2019.
We all were.
Oh, mate, it's I wish I'd come from a different kind of background because I'm non-technical. 2018 come along. While I was at university, I was working 2 jobs and I was trying to save up a deposit for a house. And then 2018 came along. I found out about Bitcoin as well. And I was like, I might leave university. I might go and look into Bitcoin. And at the same time, I started a business. I got like a little small personal training business. And then at the same time, I was also trying to buy my own home so I wouldn't have to pay rent anymore. Because at the time, I just thought rent was bullshit. So I thought, why not buy a home? Because at that stage, I noticed that house prices just went up and up and up and up into perpetuity. And I found saving the deposit for the house very, very hard. And I was like, why is this? But that's my background. That's a long story short. And then
I think it's a podcast. We're here for the long story.
No, that's pretty much it. That's pretty.
So you were intrigued then by like the housing prices and seeing them go up and up and up, and you're like, oh, this is a great way to store my wealth. Is that what kind of, I guess, got you into investing in Bitcoin?
Yes, I was just a little bogan. I was a little high time preference
What does a
bogan.
bogan mean, by the way, an Aussie bogan? What does
Just
it?
maybe a little bit like a hillbilly, I suppose. A little bit,
Okay.
really laid back. Just doesn't really care about much, I suppose. Just you're
Just
just a young Aussie guy. But
living
yeah, I
your life.
mean, yeah, that's it. Little Aussie bogan. But I mean, yeah, so I wanted to get rich. That was like the quote unquote get rich kind of thing. I didn't want to work. I was unemployable even back then when I was 19 or 20. I was like, God, I hate working. I want to either own my own business. So that was the personal training business kind of direction, or I want to own a home and rent out the rooms. So I had that kind of thinking when I was 19. And then, yeah, so left university to kind of go down that rabbit hole. And then late 2019, I didn't get Bitcoin at this stage. Late 2019, the repo market started blowing up. The yield curve inverted. And I was like, oh boy, the next recession is going to be a big one. So I was just trying to learn as much as I could. Like at that stage, I was listening to Max Kaiser, Andreas Antonopoulos, but I was stuck in that kind of crypto shitcoin kind of crypto videos there on YouTube. So I didn't fully get Bitcoin until maybe early 2020 when I found Bitcoin Twitter. And that's when I really went like really deep down the rabbit hole. I started listening to podcasts from Princey from memory, the Swan Signal guys. I think I started on Brady Swenson's podcast, Citizen Bitcoin from memory.
Hmm.
And then I found Svetsky and then Breed Love. And, you know, when you get to Bitcoin Twitter, you it's pretty hard not to be orange pilled.
Oh, it's a whole nother animal once you're there. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
it was easier as a lurker. Once I started participating, then I was like, it makes it even crazier. So early 2020 is a perfect time. That's basically, I guess, your first buy-in in, or I mean, is that when you first bought in? Like that was the first time you were like, or were you buying shit coins and Bitcoin earlier than that?
Yeah, so 2018, I was trying to learn as much as I could about investing and all of that kind of stuff. And I got all the propaganda. So you've got to be quote unquote diversified. So I was buying Bitcoin around 3 or 4K, that bottom in 2018 when I first heard about it. But I was quote unquote diversified. So I had a little bit of like gold and precious metals because I heard about the
Hmm.
Fiat Ponzi. I wanted to have like a little portion for a deposit for a home. I had a basket of stocks. So I was looking into all of these biomed stocks, tech stocks, robotics, automation, all of those, you know, high and flying stocks that would do well over the next 5 or 10 years. And then, yeah, it wasn't until 2020 until I was properly orange pilled. I was like, oh, hang on a minute. It literally is Bitcoin and it's nothing else. Bitcoin's going
Hmm.
to outperform absolutely everything. And not only that, but I don't own my own home, really, in theory. Like
Oh yeah.
they could very easily confiscate your own home. They could very easily confiscate any of your shares that's sitting on a stock trading platform. They could very easily confiscate any cash in a bank. So I was like, oh, wow, it's Bitcoin, not just because it's economically superior and it's going to do a 2000x from here if it becomes the next global reserve currency, but it's also an asset that you can actually hold in a sovereign way that we've never seen before as humans. We've never had the ability to hold Bitcoin in like a multi-signature setup where you can geographically distribute your keys in a way that nobody can confiscate your Bitcoin. So
Hmm.
yeah, I had that kind of realization early 2020. But I moved from Tasmania 2019 before I was properly orange pilled. And obviously all my friends and family were down in Tasmania. I'm on the Gold Coast now. I was trying
How
to
far
tell them
away
all
is that,
about
by the way? Because I know
uh
nothing about Australia geography.
yeah, it's across the water and it's probably like a 18 or probably 5 or 6 hour plane ride. So I
Okay.
I haven't really seen all of my close friends and family um, since I've been orange pilled. So you're trying to orange pill people on the phone. You're sitting there rambling for hours. They think you're crazy.
Yeah. Uh
So I
huh.
thought, oh, how can I do this? So I started a little YouTube channel like late 2020. I think the price was about $7 or $8 or $9,000. I was like, hey, look, 4 year halving cycle. We're about to have a big bull run here. Buy some goddamn Bitcoin. Buy some Bitcoin. So I started a little YouTube channel, and I realized that I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. Because when you go and try to explain things on a video, you're like, oh shit, I don't understand any of this.
Uh-huh.
So then,
It's
yeah,
a
I
bad
think since
time to realize you're like, wait a minute, I don't
I've
know
got to
what
do
I'm talking
more.
about. That's
Yeah,
why
I've got
I
to do
don't sit
more.
here and talk to people about what they should do. I ask other people, hey,
Don't
what do you know? So I can learn.
don't be so humble. You absolutely kill it in those spaces, but that's part of the reason why I do my podcast as well, dude. We get the opportunity to talk to the smartest people in the space and learn a bunch, because I think, yeah, since 2019, you know what it's like when you just kind of discover what Bitcoin is. I couldn't sleep for a couple of weeks there just trying to learn as much as you can about Bitcoin. And since 2019, it's 12, 16 hours a day of podcasts, reading, interacting with Bitcoiners on Twitter, trying to learn as much as you can. So that's the long story of my background, I suppose.
Oh, that's wild. That's wild. So now, um, to get into so amongst all the studying that you did, some of that digs into like the deep history of, I'm sure, economics and everything. So like, where do you see the Bitcoin started, or well, not Bitcoin? Where do you see that we started to deviate in the problem? And don't be afraid to go as far back, because I'm working on tracing it back, and it keeps going further and further and further.
Yeah.
So what do you see from any kind of digging you've done?
Yeah, that's okay. So I think mankind's kind of used physical forms of money for, I think I saw records the other day that seashells were used like 75,000 years ago from different ancient tribes. But money in general, I think gold was kind of the first actual kind of form of money, 5,000-6,000 years ago, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
And before then, it was just kind of barter. Obviously, the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago kind of facilitated the need for money, because that was the first time in human history that we human beings actually accumulated capital in the form of whether that be rice or grains or wheat. And as you start growing a civilization, money's just a tool that makes trade a lot easier and more efficient, and you can grow the economy and the civilization more. So since about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, gold's mainly been money. To put it really simply, gold outcompeted all other forms of money like seashells, copper, silver, rice stones. There's been all sorts of things used as money. And then when did it start to go really wry? I suppose that would be central banking started trying to come in around the 16th and the 17th century in Britain. And then obviously, I think 1913 with the creation of the US Fed. Little hat tip to the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. I think everybody listening to the podcast should go and read that one. That is really illuminating, gives you the background of central bankers and the people involved and the families involved with central banking. I think that's a really interesting read. And there's an abridged version, because it's a very long book. I think I read the summary, the 100-page abridged book, but it's good. The US Fed came in 1913, and then obviously that was kind of the end of the gold standard for the rest of the world. I think since 1800, we've had over 700 paper currencies that aren't backed by gold that have collapsed through currency collapses. So
the US dollar collapsing is not going to be a unique event.
Oh, no. This is just human history repeating itself. Since 1800, there's a really good report by Hirschman Capital. Since 1800, out of the sovereign nations, 51 out of 52 countries that have had a debt to GDP ratio greater than 130% have defaulted. So 51 out of 52 of those countries. And right now, the US has national debt bigger than 130%. And most of the other G7 or G20 countries around the world have even bigger debt levels. So I think globally, every single country around the world is going to collapse. This is the largest monetary experiment in human history. Like we have 180 fiat currencies around the world, connected in this kind of globally connected banking system, where once a few of the dominoes start to fall, they're all going to fall. And obviously, where did it go wrong? 1913, we kind of slowly started to de-peg from gold to pay for World War I. And then obviously you had the 1933 FDR with the gold confiscation, and then gold got revalued a couple of years later. That was another kind of event that devalued the dollar and currencies in general and took it a little bit further away from a gold peg. And then obviously World War II came along, and you had the Bretton Woods Agreement after World War II, 1944 from memory. And then so that made every currency around the world pegged to the US dollar, which was supposedly pegged to gold or as good as gold. And then obviously you had the Vietnam War in the 60s. The French and the British started to speculate that maybe the US was printing more paper receipts for the gold than they actually held in gold reserves. So then obviously 1971 come along, and the US closed the gold window on the world because they simply didn't have the gold in the Fort Knox that the French wanted. Like, didn't the French send battleships to
New York?
New York, saying we want to fill
that?
this. Yeah, it's wild.
And it's amazing that that's not in any history book in school. I mean, when you understand how the education systems run, it's not amazing. It's completely, you understand why. But like, that should be a huge subject to like sit there and be like, hey, so like, like 40 years ago, the French sent battleships to our shores to get their gold back, and we didn't give it to them. Like, what's that all about? Like, you know what I mean? Like that.
It's absolutely wild. And when I found out that in probably 2019 or maybe 2018, I came to that realization. I was like, why don't they teach us about this in school? This is really strange. And I think that's why we're both doing what we're doing with podcasts, because we're just trying to educate people about the really unique, and I don't want to swear, but effed up position that we are in comparatively in human history. Like, this is the largest monetary experiment. And in 1971, when the US implicitly defaulted on the rest of the world by closing the gold window, it started a 50-year fiat fiasco, as I call it. I mean, the average lifespan of a fiat currency is 29 years or something from memory. So out of those 700 currencies that have collapsed in history, the average lifespan is like 29 years. And since 1971, it's the 50th anniversary here in 2021 that the entire globe, the Australian dollar, the euro, the Chinese yuan, we've all been unbacked by gold. And that's a monetary experiment that's never been tried before. Every currency around the world unbacked by gold. So that's the monetary history.
And that's something that's going to explode in our face in grandiose fashion. I mean, it's getting weird right now. Because this is usually there's a couple day lead between, but I'm actually going to release this like tomorrow morning. And so this a little bit of current events mixed in, but like the whole Facebook being down. And then like I keep seeing all these things where, people are talking about all the ships being held off of ports in the United States, and it's holding up the supply chain and everything like that. And we have a deep freezer. I have my paranoia stock of stuff. Then, and we're ready to go. And my wife told me tonight, she said, "Oh, my mom called and said they were at Sam's Club, which is like one of the big it's owned by Walmart, but it's like the one like the high volume store, where you can get like things in bulk, and like kind of like Costco for those on the West Coast. And she was like, they had like no toilet paper, no paper towels, and she went back to buy a chicken pot pie or something, and they didn't have them. And the guy at the bakery said, "Oh, it's like we don't have any shells." And he's like, and this is like on the corporate level. They're like panicking, they can't get stuff. And so, my wife was like, I'm gonna get a bunch of she was like, if you see a massive grocery bill, don't freak out. And I was like, I just assume you found some kind of deal, because she does all the shopping. So I just sit there and go like, it works. But yeah, I mean, I told her, I said I was just about to tell her that we need to ramp up the supplies, so it's like something's going on, like something weird is happening. What do you think is going on?
Yeah, I get called a little bit radical in these Bitcoin Twitter spaces, because I really do think I think the entire thing's going to collapse in the next 3 years. I think it's all over before 2025. I don't want to get
the fiat system.
I think fiat collapses before 2025. I'm on record there. I've said it. I think I really do think it's the end game. This is it. Everything we're watching right now is all the early signs of a hyperinflationary event. For the first time in 50 years, we're now seeing measurable inflation in the United States. CPI's up. It's been up above 5 to 6 to 7% inflation for the past 6 months. We haven't seen inflation.
Not even the right number. That's
correct.
The fabricated number.
Yeah, that's the CPI number that's been heavily fabricated to justify them being able to expand the balance sheet by 500% over the past 20 years. I think M2's grown from something like 20 trillion to like 90 trillion since the year 2000.
And that's the amount of dollars in circulation, right?
Yeah, global M2. I think they've expanded that by 500 or 600% in the past 20-ish years. I really do think I don't think the inflation's transitory. I think it's the beginnings of literally, yes, hyperinflation. I think like the Fed is still having to print $120 billion worth of QE every single month since the repo market blew up in late 2019. Notice, ladies and gentlemen, the yield curve inverted and the repo market blew up in late 2019, well before anyone mentioned the words coronavirus or lockdown. I always like to reinforce that point.
Well, expand on that a little bit, because I mean, you know me enough to know that I'm not I'm not a financial guy. I'm a filmmaker just trying to make it in this world, and I got wrapped up into Bitcoin, and here we are. And so, you know, the reverse repo market, I mean, what exactly is that for smooth brained people like me that don't understand what it is? Because this is Bitcoin made simple after all. So
yeah, I'm very smooth brained myself, brother. This is all very foreign to me until the last couple of years, but this is something Bitcoin does. So there's an overnight lending market between banks. They lend on like a 24-hour kind of period. So the largest money market funds, they lend to the largest banks around the world. So think of like your JP Morgans, your Goldman Sachs, your Citibanks, and they obviously lend with other banks around the world in an overnight market. And the repo market in 2019, the interest rates spiked. So they spiked from 1 to 2% to above 10%, meaning that nobody would lend to each other. It was essentially a credit freeze. Some of the actors in that market, they must have had the feeling that, hang on a minute, something's off. I don't want to lend market to this perceived risky actor over here, or I think something really bad's about to happen with the stock market. I want capital. So the Fed was having to print, I think it was $500 or $600 billion between September and February. Again, this is well before the stock market crashed. And Jerome Powell was very adamant. This is not QE. There's nothing wrong with the financial markets here. Look away. This is not QE. Like, I have lots of not articles, but I do. I talk about this in one of my articles. There's screenshots and there's videos. Jerome Powell saying there's nothing wrong with the financial system. This is simply quarterly rebalancing. Look away. Look away. Look away. And then obviously the propaganda videos came out of China with people dropping dead in the streets, which we now know is directly propaganda. People don't faint like that or fall over from a virus. I won't say too much and get this one deleted, but yeah.
I'm on record. I've said to people, I'm like, all right, there's two things that are happening. People are not dropping dead in the streets from COVID, and people are also not dropping dead in the streets from the vaccine. So doesn't mean there's not anecdotal stories each way. But you know, it's nobody wants to have a nuanced conversation, you know what I mean? Like that's what I can't stand, you know. And yeah, it's a crazy world. I mean, they, you know, well, a friend of mine who's like so anon, like anonymous, that he like doesn't even have a phone anymore, and and his OPSEC is like through the roof, and and yeah, like the only way I can communicate through him, like it's like through like basically feels like carrier pigeon the way we have to communicate. Um, and yeah, it's but he's the smartest. He's one of the smartest people I know, and he called it. He called this whole thing. I mean, to the he was telling me about COVID in like January of 2020, and like just laying everything out, and I was like, okay, oh shit, like this sounds really bad. Um, and he basically said something along the lines of like this virus is either going to decimate the world like physically and actually kill a bunch of people and all that, or it's going to become a machine that's used by the state. And I mean, he called like when I say he called everything, I mean I have the receipts. I won't share the text message because like obviously he prefers his privacy, but like it was when they announced the stay-at-home orders, and I'm laying there like putting my kid to sleep, trying to like pretend like, oh yeah, everything's fine, normal life, just go to bed, let's read Berenstain Bears, blah blah blah. Um, and 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 like after my kid falls asleep, I'm like texting him like, all right, what happens next? Like you nailed everything to this point. And he called the riots in the streets. Um, he called he called what was going to go down with the politics, with the election, with the vaccine, with the speed of the vaccine, the demonization of the vaccine coming from Trump, the demonization of people that don't want to take the vaccine now that it's from Biden. I mean, I'm here to tell you this: my friend hates Trump, like hates him.
Yeah.
But he also is allergic to fascism, and he's one of those people that call what it is. It is what it is. So not to get too far away from like Bitcoin, but like, you know, to me, like, I don't know, you're living under such fascist. This is kind of getting like outside of if you're willing to go there, and we could talk about like, but I look at like everybody how we've been living life for the last 30, 40, 50 years or whatever, and it's like they've made like the perfect prison for us, you know where like everyone's goal is to like get a job that pays you enough money to make it to the next paycheck, and you get to live in a place. They won't call it a prison cell, but you call it a house, and you think you own it. Mind you, if you don't pay your property taxes, you'll find out who really owns it. um,
Yeah.
and so you wake up, you go to work, you put in your 8-9 hours, whatever, and you come home, and you think that you're creating something. You think that you're um trying to think of how to word this, because I'm not demeaning what people do, because people, that's what kills me about this, is people work hard. People put a lot of hard work into their lives, and it gets robbed right out from underneath them. And I've used this example on the podcast before, but my uncle passed away 6 months after he retired, or 9 months after he retired. And it's like that's the type of stuff that makes you think like, oh shit. You know what I mean? Like you work your whole life with the hopes of like hitting your 60s and being able to quote unquote retire and live off of the money that the government saved for you. Um, and that's how you're supposed to live your life. So like you're supposed to waste all your good years just slaving away with the carrot that, hey, I might be able to relax one day. And they put you on that hamster wheel, and here you are. You get to the end, you're exhausted, people's bodies are ruined, their minds are ruined, and they're just happy to get there. And if they're lucky to get there, and they're like, oh, I'm so glad I made it to retirement. And then they get to just like wither away on the government, quote unquote, government dollar that is really the dollar that was stolen from them and held on to over years. So we talk about these perfect prisons, that the Great Reset, like people have talked about that they want to put you in, but it's like it kind of in a way has almost existed, don't you think?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned lots of really good points there. Firstly, sorry for your loss. That's really sad, but that's the fiat propaganda that they push to people. They say, yep, go and get a mortgage on your home, go and get a mortgage on your car, go and get a mortgage on your credit cards. Yeah, don't worry about the 25% interest rates on your credit cards. It's all good. Just get into debt up to your eyeballs, and it's all good. It's all good because you've got your little hamster wheel job. You go and work your little hamster wheel job, and don't worry about the fact that prices just go up and up and up into perpetuity. Inflation's normal. Inflation's a sign of a healthy economy. I think you mentioned there, it's slavery. They're stealing from you. That's exactly what's happening. It's central banking time theft. Inflation is theft. Printing money out of thin air and using QE and lowering interest rates to artificially low levels to prop up a massive housing bubble and a stock market bubble. It's theft. It's directly theft. That's what it is. It's putting the average price of a home out of reach for the average everyday person. So they're stuck renting. And when they do finally get onto the mortgage kind of property ladder, they're paying ridiculous rates, ridiculous prices for houses. Most people can't afford the privilege to even buy their own home these days. It's I think the wealth inequality levels at the moment are some of the most extreme they have been in the past 150 years. When you get to the conclusion of a long-term debt cycle, wealth inequality is at these really extreme levels, and the system's unsustainable. But I suppose that's where Bitcoin comes in, because the old system's unsustainable. It's irreversibly broken. It's disgusting that central banks have the ability to manipulate money to inflate their own stock and house portfolio, because they naturally understand how the system works. They have 90% of their wealth in stocks and houses. But when you look at the what the everyday person stores their wealth in, they can't afford the privilege to own their own home. What is it, like 40% of Americans don't own stocks? 70% of Americans don't have more than $1,000 to get through a rainy day. And the money they do get just gets instantly debased. It's all a consequence of the fiat system, and it's all a consequence of living in the largest monetary experiment in human history. You raised lots of good points there. I'm going off on all sorts of tangents, but
no, I'm right there with you. I mean, because you like, I'll never forget. So there was this movie that I was working on, and where we were, the location we were in, it was kind of like more of like a tough neighborhood. I mean, Pittsburgh is a steel town. Like, we were the steel capital of the world. Andrew Carnegie was here. Mellon was here. And it was like, I mean, I forget the percentage exactly, but I mean, of that, like, a super majority of the steel was at one point all coming from Pittsburgh. And so I forget where I was going with that. Sorry. But I get on a Pittsburgh rant. I just start talking about Pittsburgh. I get all excited.
I love it. I didn't know that. I've been meaning to read that Rockefeller book, but I just haven't got around to it.
Yeah, Rockefeller was like, he was maybe up near like Ohio, I think. It's interesting, but yeah, they shit, I can't remember. Oh, so yeah, so there's certain parts of the city that are still in this, like, there's still mill workers, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's very, very few, but there's some. And so we're working on this movie in this town. It's like row houses that were built by Carnegie for all his employees to live in. How convenient. You live in this nice little house, within a walking distance of the mill that you get to work in, and it's like they position it to you as a benefit to you. Like, look how great this is that you get to here. Like, you have this small little area that you can call your own, and then you can walk out of it and go down here and work in this factory. Isn't that great that you have this freedom, and it's like, and I just remember sitting there like every morning. So like on a movie set, if you're doing shooting daylight hours, I mean, you get to set at like, hours before dawn. And so it was like every day, this one guy, I'll never forget, in the one row house, his car, it was wintertime, and it was on the clock at like 5 o'clock in the morning. He came out, started his car so that it would get warm, went back inside for like 15 minutes, and then came back out, got in his car, and like went to work. And like, me being this like low level crew worker on this movie, I remember just standing there, because like in those early hours when you're a production assistant like I was at the time, you're just sitting there like literally doing nothing, like wasting your time. And so you have so much time to think. And I remember sitting there looking at that car and just it was like kind of like a metaphor where it was just like running and running and running. And I was like, this car is running and it's doing is sitting still in emptying its gas tank. And that kind of is a metaphor for what this guy is doing, you know.
I know where we were going before. We both got lost there. It's
Yeah,
the
no,
Fiat
no.
system. It's the forced high time preference. Everyone's on this hamster wheel. Their money's been perpetually debased to prop up these massive asset bubbles. And everybody's just trying to pay the debt. Oh, okay, I've got a mortgage. I've got a car debt. I've got a credit card debt. I've just got to go to work. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter. I hate my job. Doesn't matter that I'm getting shit wages that don't keep up with the price of inflation or the asset bubbles. I just need to go to work. I need to do what I got to do. I've got to work 50-hour work weeks doing a job that I hate. And it's just having a money that's systematically broken, that's debased by 10% a year. It forces you into this kind of high time preference mentality where you don't think with a low time preference. You can't plan for your future. You can't, delay gratification because all of your money is going to paying all of the things that imprison you, the mortgage, the debt for your credit card, that's
All
where
the
you.
fiat stuff that you buy, like
Yes.
the my my wife when occasionally get to drop some Bitcoin bombs on her, we were
Occasionally.
yeah, she's just like, okay, that's enough, I'm done. But at T-ball over the weekend, which is just like American baseball, for like little kids, and my wife was sitting near the other team, and she was just overhearing like parent conversations, and she was just like, "Oh my god, like these people, they're talking about going to Starbucks and how they go every day." And they get their drink, and she's like looking at it, and she was like, "This cup was like massive." She's like, "Yeah, it'd been like that's like a $7-8 coffee." And I was like, Bitcoin fixes this. like we're driving. I
Yes.
was like,
Yes.
Bitcoin fixes this because like people like they're so stuck in that fiat mindset, and it's like once
Yeah.
you get pulled through the orange pill, you're like on the other side. You're like, I mean, it's like it's kind of like whenever you have figured out the matrix, when Neo figures out the matrix and everything's ones and zeros around you, where you can just look
Yeah.
around and see everything for what it is, and you're like, that's a waste of money. That's a waste of money. That's a waste of money.
That's
Like,
a distraction. That's a distraction. That's a distraction. I'm glad you brought up the Matrix metaphor. I was about to bring it up. Once you take the orange pill and you see the world for what it really is, you can't unsee anything in your everyday life. You realize that everybody's been systematically brainwashed through the propaganda machines, the TV. Like that's a lot of the reason why our society is so kind of materialistic. It's forced into people from the day they're born on the TVs. Oh no, you want the fancy car. Oh yeah, you want the fancy house here in Australia. There's nothing as safe as brick and mortar. Yeah, you've got to go and got to jump onto the property ladder. It's all, when you see all of it, you're like, everything just makes sense. Everybody's so distracted. Everybody, they might get one day off a week on the Sunday and they don't want to face the reality of the situation they're in. They go and get absolutely plastered. And they just have these massive benders because they're stuck in this kind of nihilistic, self-perpetuating doom loop. And they just think, I can't do anything with my life. I can't plan for the future. I don't have time to learn. I don't have time to have any sort of entrepreneurial thinking. I'm just my only 12-hour day that I have off work, I'm just going to go and get absolutely plastered. So I don't have any sort of sense of the reality of the world and what's actually occurring. People don't want to come to the realization, or people don't want to think about the possibility that maybe they're living in the matrix, and maybe the governments don't have their best interests at heart. Maybe the reason they can't get ahead is because the money is systematically broken in a very intentional manner to steal from the everyday person who doesn't understand how money works. I mean, everybody goes to school, and in school, we used to always like joke around. Why aren't we getting taught about like the useful things, like how to avoid taxes or how to think entrepreneurially or out of the box? I mean, even at university, when I was there, I noticed it. You're not taught or encouraged to kind of use critical thinking. It's you read this, that's the way it is. Keynesian economics is God. Government is God. Printing money is normal. Inflation is normal. You read all that and you simply regurgitate it on a test. You're not thought to think critically of how that could be bad for the economy, how that could create wealth inequality, how that could create asset bubbles. They don't teach you about financial history. They don't teach you about gold being money for the past 5,000 years. And it's people don't want to come to the realization that maybe the nation state or our governments don't have our best wishes at heart. Earlier, you mentioned prison. They're creating potentially a perfect prison for us. And when I say this to people like normies, they kind of, their eyes just glaze over. They're like, oh, yeah, righto, crazy Bitcoiners going on a crazy Bitcoin rant. But I say it very simply. It's either Bitcoin succeeds or we're living in an absolute digital panopticon, literally like a 1984 or Animal Farm-like environment in 20 years' time. Because when you transition into the digital age, with the technological revolution of the 1971, the computer, when we're living in this digital environment, you could be really screwed. Like we have the potential to be living in this digital prison where all of our transactions are surveilled, all of our communications are surveilled. There's a camera on the corner of every single street. They've banned cash. This is the direction our current governments are taking us in. They want full surveillance of every citizen. And you mentioned the World Economic Forum earlier. They're coming out there and they're telling you, look, you will own nothing. You'll be happy. Everything that you want in your life in the future, don't worry about owning it. You will rent it. And it's kind of like when you're a Bitcoiner and you see the overall trend of where everything's going, it becomes very obvious the direction they want to take us. I mean, China's kind of working on a central bank digital currency model where each citizen has a social credit score, and they've really phased out cash over there. And if you have a bad social credit score, you and your whole family can instantly get cut off the financial system. You can't transact, you can't buy food, you can't get a train ticket, you can't get a plane ticket. You're trapped in this perfect prison. And overnight in China, you can get disappeared. And a lot of people say, no, Luke, you're crazy. If Bitcoin doesn't succeed, that couldn't come to a Western democratic country. There's no way that our governments in the United States or Australia would do that to us. That's crazy talk. But look at the direction they're taking us. Every single country, Reserve Bank of Australia, the US Fed, they're all talking about implementing a central bank digital currency. And yeah, I mean, I've said a lot there.
Keep don't you don't have to stop ranting. You're good. I could listen to the Luke rant. I mean it's
like that's where they're taking us. That is where they're taking us in every single country around the world. I haven't even put the tinfoil hat on yet. I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but
you have one right there.
Yeah, fucking oath I do. I have to keep it from my videos, man. I always get really, I always bring out the conspiracy theories, but I think everything you're seeing in the world, it's a classic example of the quote from the Roman Empire. It's all, if you distract the masses with the bread and the circuses, they will never revolt. And I think all the events that you're seeing post 2020 is exactly that. They're all distractions and they're all divide and conquer techniques. Oh, you don't want to get the medical treatment from the government. Divide and conquer, the race wars, the tax the rich thing. Like recently with AOC wore that dress from the it's the irony that she rocks up at some $30,000 ticketed privileged event with the slogan Yeah. See, it's a different set of rules for the upper class, the quintillionaires, than it is for the rest of us plebs, the 99.9%.
I think do you think people are starting to wake up to it? Because I mean, so you're living it in Australia because it's absolutely insane what's going on there now. Um, but I think that like people in maybe like a soft way are revolting because not everybody, as much as we'd love everybody to be as vocal as we are about like speaking out against these problems. Um, I think that a lot of places, like people were just like being like, you know what? Yeah, I'm done. Like, yeah, like they're gonna push another thing on me. Like, they so those people might, obey and comply or whatever. And if push came to shove and their money was on the line, they'd have to comply. But I think that a lot of people and the good thing is that'll wake more people up because they'll be like, you walk in the stores, you see people. I mean, just people starting to realize how f this system is. Like I've said on the spaces before. I'm like orange pilling, or if it's lightning, it's yellow pilling maybe. Um,
I
uh,
like that.
the delivery or like people like doing like pickup orders and stuff at like Target and like the others, Walmart or whatever. I'm like tipping them in sats and like, hey, like download the Moon Wallet, download Wallet of Satoshi, and right now I will send you 1,000 sats for doing the job you're doing. Because the funny thing is, I think for the most part, some of them will take it, but I remember during the pandemic trying to like tip them, and they were like, "Oh, we're not supposed to take tips." And I was like, "All right, just show me. I'll just scan your QR code. I'll send you something. Don't worry." Um, and
That's awesome.
so I think stuff like that, people are starting to wake up and go, something's wrong. Like, even I don't know. Do you think like we say normies? Do you think normies are starting to wake up and go, something's a little off? Like that moment when
Yeah.
you wake up and you're like, you can smell it in the air. You're like, something's weird. Something's
Yeah.
going down.
Yeah, when you I get accused a little bit of being a little bit too dystopic or talking about the really potential for a really dark kind of future. I always like to reinforce the fact that no, I think Bitcoin wins in the long run.
Oh
Bitcoin's
yeah.
just saving us from this really Orwellian dystopic future. I just like to outline it so people are aware of where we're going if Bitcoin fails.
And like people call you conspiracy theorist. And I said to my dad when he was saying like, "Oh, you're being a little conspiracy theory," I was like, "Dad, I would agree with you if they didn't actually say these things on their websites. Like it's
Yep.
there. They say it
Yep.
in plain English."
That's what I
So
was saying earlier. I was like, I haven't even brought out the tinfoil hat yet. This is all literally stuff off
yeah,
the
that
World
they've
Economic
said.
Forum's website. They're telling you will own nothing and you'll be happy. That's their prediction for 2030. The International Monetary Fund, right? This isn't some Chinese think tank kind of national news website. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, came out November last year in 2020, and they said, yes, we think it's a good idea that everybody around the world has their social credit score influenced by what they type into Google. This is the International Monetary Fund talking about social credit scores. How is that related to International Monetary Fund jurisdictions? Why are they talking about that? So, yeah, I think that's where they're taking us. And I think, yes, there is enough people waking up. I think in February or March last year in 2020, I said, look, this isn't a one-time lockdown. You know where it's going to end. I was reading the ID 2020, the Bill Gates connections with the whole ID 2020. I was like, where it ends. And I was reading I'd read the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the book that Klaus Schwab had written from, he's the head of the World Economic Forum. It's a book detailing in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, we're going to merge the biological man with machines. And he's been on videos saying, yeah, it's very likely that by 2030, everybody will have a computer chip implanted into their brain and we will know their thoughts before they even think them. So I was like, as soon as the lockdowns happened in 2020 and there was a virus, I was like, yep, this is the mechanism. This isn't all 14 days to flatten the curve. You're going to get recurring lockdowns. You're going to have 10 or 11 lockdowns. You're going to have lots of different strains. It's going to end in compulsory vaccination, and they're going to eventually get something into your body. Like this is the World Economic Forum CEO telling you that this is what's going to happen. And I was saying that in February 2020, when lockdowns were first mentioned. People thought I was nuts then. Like people thought I was full blown, like tinfoil hat was out. People thought I was full blown crazy. But now I think a lot of people are waking up. I think you've already seen the line drawn in the sand. 20 to 30% of people in most countries around the world have said, nope, that's the line in the sand. As soon as you try to forcibly put something in my body, that's it. It's not happening. And so I think that's enough for a revolution. I think the 20%, they're all Bitcoiners. They just don't know it yet. I also think that just the fact that the nation state in the past 18 months, people need to zoom out. If 18 months ago in 2019, I'd said to you, look, every single Western democratic country, even the United States, the country that has the most freedom and the most guns in the world, if I tell you that their president's pushing through compulsory medical, I don't want to get this banned or taken down, compulsory medical inoculations, and they put you on repeating and recurring lockdowns, that wouldn't happen, would it? And people would have said, there's no way in the goddamn world. But look at how far like the Overton window's changed in 18 months. And I think people are suffering from recency bias, and they don't think that in 18 months' time, things can get just as exponentially crazy. And I think they will. I think I said this in a space yesterday. I think the next 2 years will be the most transformative years in human history. I think it has the potential to all shake out in the next 2-3 years. I think fiat collapses. I think Bitcoin goes through some sort of escape velocity where it breaks all of these stock to flow models. I think Bitcoin's I've got bets with a few different people. I think Bitcoin hits $10 million before 2030. And I think it's all due to all the madness we're seeing in the world. The madness and how quickly things are changing in the world is, in my eyes, an indication that central banks and nation states around the world are they're aware of the fact that they're losing control of the monopoly on money for the first time in 5,000 years, and they're freaking the F out. And that's Bitcoin. And I think we're just watching more and more intelligent individuals realize that Bitcoin is the solution to the biggest problem that we've got in human history, and that's a broken money, and that's elites being able to monopolize the money, whether that be through coin clipping, or whether that be through egregious taxation, or whether that be through a magic money printer that we have now in the 20th century. The money's always been able to be corrupted. It's always been able to be monopolized by the elites. And finally, for the first time in human history, we have a form of money that cannot be monopolized, and it's going to separate the state and money. And I think we're watching them wake up to the realization of that. And that's why they're freaking out so much, trying to grab as much control before they're ready to implement central bank digital currencies. I think they're literally racing the clock against central bank digital currencies. I think lockdowns that come out every 2 to 3 months are really conveniently timed to kind of slow down the velocity of money and stop inflation getting out of hand. I think the fact that the reverse repo is there's currently every single night $1.5 trillion of money, excess liquidity in the system, that people is shoving it to the Fed, and the Fed is having to take $1.5 trillion off the market every single night to kind of keep the stability of the system alive. And then on the other end of that, the Fed's still printing $120 billion every single month to keep the bailouts going and to keep the system solvent. And then you're also watching inflation levels, which we haven't seen in 50 years, be printed. I mean, we touched on the manipulated CPI inflation index hitting 5 or 6%. That's right. It's heavily manipulated. It was heavily manipulated in the 80s and the 90s. Real inflation is somewhere between 13 and 14% in the US, not 5 or 6%. I highly recommend everyone go and check out the website. Shadow Stats simply measures the way the governments used to measure inflation before they manipulated the metrics in the 80s or 90s. And real inflation's 13 to 15%.
Didn't they just manipulate them again?
Yeah, Biden was talking about taking commodities out of the CPI inflation basket recently, and there's another story from a Fed official somewhere that was saying, yeah, if you take chicken, meat, and eggs out of the CPI inflation basket, inflation is more in line with what it's historically been, and it's like, mate, that's half my goddamn grocery bill, chicken, eggs, and meat. And there's a good reason they want to take it out of the basket because meat's up 700% in the past 10 years, and it's up 100% since 2020. Chicken's up 50% since 2020. Eggs are up, God knows. I don't have that figure on the top of my head. I won't throw out one I don't know, but that ain't 5% inflation, ladies and gentlemen. That's 50% inflation. Corn up 50%. Lumber had some ridiculous spike up 400%, but has recently crashed back down. All of the things I'm looking at, none of that's 5% inflation. Used cars up 100% year over year.
It's insane.
I think it's the beginnings of hyperinflation, and I think they're freaking out. And I think supply chain issues, lockdowns. Recently, there was it was one of the Democratic ladies in the US. She gave a press conference recently and said, yeah, climate change is now going to infect inflation because guess what? It's raising the water levels and it's going to impact the ports. So that's going to impact the supply chains and that's going to cause inflation.
So do you think that's what this whole supply chain holding up things at the ports is about right now?
Yep.
To show them what the problem could be in the future?
Yep. Yeah, it's all to and I think it's also maybe potentially to implement martial law. I think there was a law passed yesterday or the day before for Canada, Wyoming, and a couple of states in the US where it's now legal for the military to be called in and take over the jobs of the people who've been fired because they didn't want to get the medical inoculation. So it's now legal for the military to come in, and that same law enables them to be able to walk into your home and seize personal property, all in the name of COVID and safety, of course. God, this video is going to get taken down, but we're so screwed.
I might not put this one on YouTube, maybe.
yeah, I've already got a strike on my channel, so I'm screwed. But yeah, I mean, I think all of it's, as Laser Hodl says, it's all a distraction to distract you from what's really going on, and that's monetary reset. And they're trying to get their idea of the next system ready, and that's central bank digital currencies. And I think they're probably a year away from getting a CBDC implemented, and I think they're freaking out. All of the supply chain interruptions, it's all, this is me speculating. This is tinfoil hat stuff. So now I'm speculating. This is all trying to hold up the financial system long enough until they're ready to roll out the CBDCs.
So do you think that, I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah. I've been ranting for a while. Sorry, mate.
No, you're scaring the bejeebus out of me. But you know, it's also, the truth is uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah. I think it helps people as well when you understand why all the craziness is going on. I think it helps to orient people. There's a lot of people dazed and confused. They're focused on losing their job. They're focused on Black Lives Matter, Antifa. They're focused on compulsory this and that. But when you realize it's all just a smoke screen and a distraction to disguise what's really going on with the monetary system, I think it can help some people kind of ground them.
Yeah, it's like, I think that's what's happening is it's like everybody's getting disoriented. Everybody's like, what, like, which way is up? Like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't even feel gravity anymore. And I think it's very interesting that, you have these small organizations that were in charge of all this money and steering the ship for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not thousands. And all of a sudden it's going to go bust on their watch. And it's all because of Bitcoin. Like, there's nothing they can do to stop it. And so how do you think, I mean, So you've laid out the doomsday scenario. Like
Yeah,
shit goes awry. I mean, we're seeing, distractions with supply chain issues. Inflation is going crazy, but they're disguising it. So what happens, you know, how does Bitcoin fix this? As the question that we always ask in Bitcoin is, how does Bitcoin fix this? Because um, it might be a bumpy few, you know, year, 2 years. But
yeah.
yeah, how does this your speculation, not tinfoil, but how do you see on the positive note, how does Bitcoin save the situation here?
Yeah. So, firstly, Bitcoin doesn't cause any of this. The central bankers and every government around the world, when they started manipulating the money and introducing central banks in 1913, the history was sown. As soon as you start debasing the money and you start accumulating debt that's unsustainable, you always need to have a reversion to the mean. You need to clear out the overgrown forest that is unproductive. You need what is it, forest fire? I'm not a,
Yeah. Yeah,
you
no,
need
I mean,
you
they
need to
do like a
burn out.
controlled burns. But like,
Yeah, yeah,
but it's funny because it's a good analogy because, um, in the United States, they try to manipulate and do like the most human thing ever, and think that we can control these wildfires.
yeah,
And I think it's like right in Baja, Mexico, like right on the other side of the border from California. Um, they don't do what we do in the States, and like they don't have the wildfires that we do. And it's because let it they let nature take its course. It Yes, there are brush fires, but it burns off dead vegetation like nature's supposed to, and lets it flourish in other places. Whereas we try to manipulate it and manipulate the forest, and then all of a sudden, poof, it explodes, and
yeah.
you have raging fires.
Yeah, that's right. The if the you can't take volatility out of a market. It's like a living organism. You can't step in there and manipulate things and caress the market and encourage all of these speculators and unsustainable business ventures because it's unproductive, it's not profitable, and they're only being kept alive by this absolute debt spiral, this absolute debt binge. 30% of the companies in the S&P 500 are zombie companies. They can't pay back the debt that they have. They can't even afford the interest on their debt. Okay, so the Fed stepping in and doing bailouts every 5 years, whether that be 1987, the year 2000 with the tech bubble crash, the 2008 housing bubble crisis, and then obviously the 2020 or 2019 recession, as I call it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's every time you step in and you try and smooth the business cycle and you don't let prices correct to where they should be, you continue to encourage all of these speculators and unproductive business ventures. And it simply weakens the economy and the businesses in it. Okay. You can't take volatility out of a market. All you're doing is compressing the volatility and putting it off into the future. Eventually, you're going to have to you're going to have to pay the piper eventually. And the longer you kick the can down the road or delay the reckoning, the bigger the reckoning is going to be. So I think that was inevitable. As soon as you started debasing the money, 1913 and 1971 was a really big stepping stone or a crossing of the Rubicon kind of event. As soon as you did that, the end result that we're about to experience was inevitable. From 1971, even 1913, the chaos that we're about to see was always going to happen. Always going to happen. And the longer they kick the can, the bigger the chaos is going to be. So Bitcoin fixes that on the other side of a very messy, of a transition that has the potential to be very messy. You can actually rebuild society with a sound money that nobody can control. So that's where Bitcoin comes in. And obviously, the reason that the chaos is going to be so chaotic is because the money was able to be centralized and manipulated. And the more it was manipulated, the larger the volatility will be, or the larger the reckoning the manipulators, the central bankers and policymakers have created. So obviously, when we're on a Bitcoin standard, it's unmonopolizable. You can't monopolize the money supply. You can't take volatility out of the market. You can't give really cheap credit to these unproductive speculators who don't have a productive business venture, and they're simply just piling on more and more debt to speculate on assets. None of that speculative fever should be present on a Bitcoin standard, because everybody's following the same rules. There is no interest rate apartheid, as Max Kaiser coins it. Everybody has the same interest rates. Everybody follows the same rules. There are no rulers. So I think once we do transition, Bitcoin is kind of a foundation that you can actually rebuild society on. So thank God we've got Bitcoin. I say that all the time.
Oh yeah, thank God for Bitcoin. And that's why I say there's, if you're a religious person, you can see this, and I am. I say there's a touch of divinity to Bitcoin, where it was, an idea that was, sent down, or however you want to look at it. It's something that that saves us from spiraling out of control. It's just crazy. So what do you recommend to people for navigating these waters? I mean, supply chains are going to get crunched. Like, I've been telling people, just keep your loved ones close, buy some land, try and get some space, get out of cities. If you're in a city, you're doing it wrong.
That's a massive one. Getting out of cities is really, really important. That's huge. I think, like, when the really bad lockdowns happen and the really bad protests and riots happen, we haven't seen them yet. They're going to be able to seal the entire cities. They did that with Sydney. They essentially sealed a city that has 2 million people in it in Australia. They called the military in, and you're not allowed outside of a 5-kilometer radius from your home. It's absolutely absurd. So get out of the cities. As Laser Hodl says it, make yourself asymmetrically expensive to tyranny. Get out in the land where it's very hard for the government and the nation state to bring tyranny to your doorstep. So get local. Food supply, I think everybody should have. I've got, God knows, years worth of food on me. So I mean, I nearly think of that as a store of value, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Because food's going
lots
up
of
at
ramen.
such a rate. Yeah, lots of ramen. Yep, Wheat Bix. I've got everything in my little my little bunker. You can call it a bunker. It's not much of a bunker. It's just a walk-in closet. But I've got all my food, bottled water. Yeah, I mean, obviously Bitcoin. I was saying this to someone the other day in a space. I'm not even a fan of owning property through the transition. I see everything can be confiscatable. I want to be mobile in the transition, so I'm renting. And I want the ability to get out of cities, or even get out of somewhat populated towns and areas quickly if I need to be, because we've never seen hyperinflation in the Western world. But all of the hyperinflations, when people can't feed their family because the price of food's so expensive, and the banks have been frozen like they have been in Nigeria this year, and like they were last year in Lebanon and Venezuela, when the banks get frozen and people can't feed their family, people you would normally consider rational actors begin acting in an unrational way. If they can't feed their family and they know that you're a Bitcoiner, I think that's probably a bad idea to be anyone who has any kind of wealth in a potential doomsday scenario. Obviously, I hope none of this happens. I kind of had this thesis in early 2020. I was like, wow, this is how it's going to end. It's going to be really nasty. I haven't seen anything in the past 16 months to suggest that we're going to be able to avoid this really kind of potentially doomsday kind of scenario. I think the nation state's going to try to fight Bitcoin. They look to be just increasing their control in every country around the world. I won't go down that rabbit hole. That'll get us properly deleted. But I would encourage the listener to go and have a look at every president from every country who said no to lockdowns and vaccine passports. Have a look at what happened to their president in the weeks following that. There's 6 of them at the moment. So there's a little bit of a rabbit hole for the listeners to go down. I mean, yeah, it looks like there's a pretty clear agenda by whoever's controlling each government around the world to enforce this great reset and this kind of build back better agenda. I think, if you have any doubt of that, just have a look at the lockstep coordinated policy decisions by every single country around the world. Get food, get water, get Bitcoin. I don't have a problem with having something like 6 or 12 months of like cash, like not money in the bank, because in a transition that's going to be frozen. 2008, the entire system froze in 2008. And that's like banks freeze. Any money in the banks isn't yours. Superannuation, that's not yours. I don't really want to be in debt for this transition. I see all of the assets, stocks, real estate, money in the bank. That's all assets in the previous system that's about to collapse. I don't want to hold any money in assets that's in the previous system until we've transitioned. So that's a bit of a rabbit hole, but that's the advice I would have for people. I like what you said. Get local, keep your friends and family close. I think that's really sound advice.
Just got to weather out the storm. It's going to be a little crazy. Ignore the internet, stay off the internet. Take a nature bath, get your feet in the grass, like your actual feet, like with no shoes on, enjoy nature. My kids are going to be feral.
That's good. Feral and safe and enjoying life and not caught up with the mainstream propaganda or stuck in the pods in the cities. I like that. I think all of the chaos and all of the change and all of the really crazy stuff, that's all essential to wake people up to the fact that life isn't as good as they have previously thought it was for the past 20 or 30 years. Like the position we are in history right now relative to a lot of these cycles is really unique. Like we're at the conclusion of this 250-year revolutionary cycle. We're at the conclusion of this 90-year fourth turning cycle. We're at the conclusion of the 75 to 100-year long-term debt cycle. And in each one of those, like at the conclusion of it, it always ends in war or the American Revolution and the French Revolution in the late 1700s. Like the last fourth turning that we went through, which is the every 90-year cycle, that was between like 1929 and 1945. What did you have in the middle of that? You had Hitler, Mussolini, you had World War II, Great Depression. 90 years before that, you had the Civil War in America. 90 years before that, you had the Revolutionary War in America. Like we're in such a unique position in human history. And everybody's kind of suffering from this recency bias. Like everybody alive today, they've only grown up and lived through the good times. They've grown up after World War II, and they think that all of the really good times that they're experiencing, they think it's just all normal. They don't understand the strength or the hard times that was necessary to create the good times. What's the quote? Good times create weak men create hard times create strong men create weak times. I think I've butchered that.
The land. I know what you mean.
The listener will know the cycle. And we're living in weak times, and we're watching the realization that the men are weak, the times are hard. We're going to need strong men to get us out of the hard times. But on the other side of that, it's going to be such a kind of awakening event that I think it's going to be the biggest revolution in human history. I think that a Bitcoin standard has the ability to end a lot of these 90-year cultural and generational cycles, or significantly diminish it at least. I think taking the money out of the hands of the governments is going to stop this boom and bust cycle that we go through with this 80-year long-term debt cycle. So potentially no more 10-year economic depressions like we had in the 1930s, or like we're going to have and have kind of been living through since 2008. We've kind of been living through a 10-year depression. When you look at GDP growth on the Shadow Stats website, we actually haven't been, there's really been no economic growth. It's just been more and more debt being piled onto the system, more and more bailouts to give the illusion of nominal GDP growth. Again, in a very heavily manipulated metric. Unemployment isn't like 5 or 6% like governments claim it is. When you look at the unemployment metric on Shadow Stats, it's actually much more like 25%. So that's more of an indication that we're actually in a depression, not in a healthy economy. So yeah, I think rebuilding on the other side, I think it really is a modern day renaissance. I think it really is going to be probably the biggest revolution in human history. And I think
you think that'll happen by 2025?
So I think we're probably still chaotic by 2025. I think Bitcoin, I think we have a run on Bitcoin that breaks the stock to flow model before 2025. I think now that you've got nation states stacking Bitcoin, now that you've got all of the largest macroeconomic investors around the world interested in buying Bitcoin, so that's Ray Dalio, Stanley Druckenmiller, Bill Miller. You've got all the biggest banks in America, JP Morgan, Citibank, they're all interested in Bitcoin. I think now you've got the big money in Bitcoin. They're the money that's going to break the S-curve adoption, or not break it, but they're the money that's going to send us up the really steep part of that S-curve adoption chart, because there's no coins for sale. Like there's no Bitcoins for sale. Nobody's selling any Bitcoin. What is it? Like 86% of the supply hasn't moved in 6 months. There's only like 2.5 million coins on an exchange. When you start doing the math,
where are those coins coming from?
Hey,
where are those coins coming from?
Nobody's selling. That's the thing. So it's not going to take a lot of large actors to get involved to send Bitcoin to 500K or even $5 million in the next 5 years. People think I'm crazy, but do the math. Michael Saylor has 100,000 coins.
Let's do some
moon math.
This is everybody's first introduction to moon math. So let's go with it.
I love my moon math. But I mean, if there's only 2.5 million coins on the exchange, right? And Michael Saylor owns 100,000 coins, how many Michael Saylors can come in and accumulate a position of the same size that Michael Saylor has? 25 people, that's it. 25 entities. And you start looking at the amount of cash out there, there's hundreds of trillions of dollars managed by institutions. I mean, even the largest tech companies around the world, Microsoft, Apple, they all have like $200 billion worth of money sitting on their balance sheet.
Just sitting there.
That Michael Saylor calls a melting ice cube that's losing 30% of its value each year. What happens when Bill Gates and co come to the realization that they're sitting on a $200 billion pile of melting fiat? What happens when they have the same realization that Michael Saylor has? Michael Saylor really eloquently describes the process that we all go through when you eat the orange pill and you realize what Bitcoin is. Michael Saylor was panicked that he would wake up the next day and somebody would figure Bitcoin out before he was able to establish his position. He said he was panicked that he wanted to accumulate his position as soon as he could. Like he was saying, he had these bots that were making Bitcoin transactions every 3 seconds. He was quietly buying millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin to not send the price crazy.
I think he was buying like 1 Bitcoin a second on average.
Yeah.
Like just so that it was spread out. It's crazy because like I even have, that's the only panic I have about Bitcoin is like I've mentioned it before in spaces, but there's this keg of dry powder that I'm waiting on that is coming back to me, but I can't control when it comes back to me. And my God, was like, it was just a little over a year ago. It was like right before the pandemic that I made this investment. Boy, do I regret that. Because it'll in fiat terms pay off. but I'm sitting here the whole time. I've been like in panic mode, waiting for this to come back so that I can immediately turn it all into Bitcoin. And yeah, I kind of have that same. I don't remember hearing Michael Saylor say that, but I believe it because I have the same panic where I sit there and I like it starts ripping up, and I'm like, no, 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 wait,
come back,
wait,
come back.
I'm not ready for that yet. I'm not
Yeah.
all in. Like, I mean, I'm all in every other aspect, but I'm not all in this aspect. Like, Jesus,
Yeah.
please wait.
Come back. But
Uh,
this is going to happen on the nation state level. You're going to have nation state level actors who come to the same realization that Michael Saylor had, and they're going to be panicked to buy Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin Tina says it. He says it really well. You could see a scenario where Bitcoin just gets repriced. That could happen over a week or a month, but you could wake up one day and the price of Bitcoin goes from 300K to $10 million because nobody's selling. And someone like a nation state, like say, Turkey's a bad example because they're just trying to ban Bitcoin right now. But say a nation state like Nigeria or a bigger, was it Brazil came out recently and they're pushing through a bill to make Bitcoin as potentially legal tender. What happens when a country like Brazil or Mexico, who has 100 million people, what happens when they make Bitcoin legal tender? I think all the models are going to break in the next 5 years. I think there's probably if I had to put a probability on it, I think the models break. Like there's a 30% probability that it breaks this cycle, 2022. And I think there's probably a 60 to 70% probability that it breaks by the 2024 cycle. So you asked earlier, what happens by 2025? I think it's structurally impossible that we're all living on a Bitcoin standard by 2025.
a lot of infrastructure needs to be built.
Yeah, Lightning, it's just not happening. But I see a scenario where there's maybe Bitcoin, the US dollar, and maybe a couple of the other larger fiats left, like maybe the Chinese yuan, maybe the euro. I can see a scenario in 5 or 6 years where there's only Bitcoin, the US dollar, the euro, and the Chinese yuan left fighting it out. The dollar milk, for anyone who's listening, I subscribe to the dollar milkshake theory by Brent Johnson. When the currencies collapse, the USD is going to be the last one to collapse because there's so much USD denominated debt out there in these emerging markets, and the whole euro dollar, and that's a whole cluster F. That's a system that's just out of control. So yeah, I think, and I do think nation states are going to try and attack Bitcoin when it goes through this kind of S curve price rally. I think as Bitcoin goes from 200K, 300K, 500K, and it starts getting out of control simultaneously while the legacy financial system is breaking down on the other end. We talked about the transitory inflation, the $120 billion of QE a month. We talked about the reverse repo market. While Bitcoin's going through 200, 300, 400, 500K, wouldn't be surprised to see the nation states really attack it really hard. What does that look like? Let's speculate. Tinfoil hat. Let's really speculate. Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum in 2019, October 2019, Klaus Schwab held a tabletop scenario forecasting event predicting what would happen if a coronavirus epidemic was to break out around the world. This was October 2019, right? He got some global leaders all around the world. They really elaborate videos. They're still on Google. The people can go and check them out if you think I'm going down the tinfoil hat rabbit hole. But all the videos are still up there. This was October. This was a month after the repo market blew up. This was 2 months after the yield curve inverted. This was 2 months after the Fed was printing hundreds of billions of dollars, and all the while being very adamant that it shouldn't be regarded as QE. Klaus and the World Economic Forum co-partnered with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and held Event 201. What would happen if coronavirus broke out? We all know what happened 2 months later. Now, 2021, Klaus and the World Economic Forum held another tabletop scenario forecasting event predicting what would happen to the world if a cyber terror attack was to attack the electrical grid and take down the internet. What would happen? And they came out of that event saying, yeah, we think there's a 12% probability that by 2030, the entire global, I think it's the global electrical grid and the internet could go down. And Klaus is saying, yeah, the cyber pandemic could be even crazier than COVID. It could be even scarier. The grid could go down for weeks, even months on end. So that could be a way, ladies and gentlemen, that maybe the nation state fights back against Bitcoin. This is really tinfoil hat speculation territory here. I'm really speculating, but it wouldn't surprise me to see that. And I've prepared accordingly. I think the World Economic Forum proved their predictive capabilities in late 2019, predicting a virus outbreak that was absurd, really. So I pay attention to what they say. And that's what Klaus is talking about. He held that event called Cyber Polygon, I think it was 3 months ago, predicting a internet apocalypse. That's what he calls it at Cyber Polygon. So that wouldn't surprise me. That is also the mechanism in which I maybe expect could be one scapegoat they use to transition the old financial system into the new financial system, onto the central bank digital currency backed system. We're already seeing the ransomware attacks and the cyber terror attacks on the rise in 2020. I saw an article the other day. Cyber attacks are up 330% in 2020 over compared to 2019. What a surprise! And all of like the what was that pipeline that went down in the United States, caused all the blackouts? They blamed that on Bitcoin as well. They said, yeah, the hackers got caught using $5 or $6 million of Bitcoin. They demanded Bitcoin. So it wouldn't surprise me if Bitcoin's demonized in this potential risk factor. Okay, I'm speculating.
Do you think the Facebook going down today, do you think that has anything to do with it?
Probably a test run. Who knows? It could just be like Facebook and these services go out a couple of times every year, so it could just be server issues. But it wouldn't surprise me. I was very interested on.
It's eerie timing.
Yeah, it is
eerie timing.
But I'm interested. So if that attack happens, I don't know what probability of that happening is. Like I'm really speculating, 20 or 30% probability. If that does happen, I'm really interested to see what happens to Bitcoin then. Do countries like Brazil, Panama, Cuba, Ukraine, El Salvador, all of these countries that have shown interest in Bitcoin in the past month, what do they do when the G7 or the G20 countries potentially attack Bitcoin? So like again, we're just speculating. I'm not sure what would happen, but I'm very interested to see what would happen. It wouldn't surprise me to see it adopted by a lot of these Latin American countries. Even the Argentinian president was in an interview last week, maybe the week before. He got asked about Bitcoin laws and he said, I'm not opposed to it. So that was interesting. Most presidents just write it off as a scam when asked about it. So, and the US really does look like they're posturing to clear out a lot of the shitcoins. Like the US is, surely there's with the infrastructure bill, there was an amendment that came out of the White House or something that was hating on proof of stake specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked like
it was singling out proof of stake, and like they basically said like Bitcoin's the only like real, everything else is a security.
Yeah, so I'm really optimistic. I hope the US adopts Bitcoin. I'm
holding out faith for that because, like, you know, like I've said to people, do I trust politicians? No. But do I hope for the best? Absolutely. Yeah. Because if the US adopted Bitcoin, I mean, it whether they see it or not, for the politicians, it is in their best interest to adopt Bitcoin because it's the only way that the US retains world power. But you know, it makes our lives a lot easier if they do. It makes
my fingers are crossed. Like I've laid out, like I've given you guys an absolute doom loop of a rant for the past hour about the World Economic Forum and potential risk factors and potential threats for how the nation state might fight back against Bitcoin. But I'm really hopeful. I hope it's a smooth transition. I hope the US adopts Bitcoin as in its treasuries. I hope the rest of the world adopts Bitcoin, and it's just China who's left banning it. And I think that would be really fitting. Of course, a communist country, and that's essentially under a dictatorship kind of regime. It'd be really nice that a communist country bans freedom money. I mean, that's kind of it's not really nice, but it's hopeful for the rest of the world who's opposed to China and theoretically opposed to China's communistic model. It would be really nice that the rest of the world kind of says, you know what, if China bans Bitcoin, we'll adopt it. I'm really hopeful. I really do hope that happens. And I hope the people of China are able to access Bitcoin and escape the authoritarian rise of the central bank digital currency social credit score that's been forced upon the Chinese citizens. I think that's horrible. I hope they're able to use Bitcoin in a safe way. But yes, geopolitically, China banning Bitcoin, theoretically, I think that's good for the rest of the world.
Oh yeah, people. I mean, I knew that it would cause some price issues in the short term, but I mean, like, I love the fact that the hash rate's already back up, and there's nothing. I mean, it's just like that was the biggest thing. Like, the only thing bigger would be the U.S. banning it, but like that would at this point be maybe marginally bigger. Marginally. So yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing to see how they're like, we banned it, and then like they're like, we banned it, by the way. Like they keep like throwing that out there in the news, like, by the way, we super ban it this time, man. Like we really mean it. Nobody's Bitcoining in our house. Like this, there will be
Price,
no
come
Bitcoin
back.
talk. Yeah,
come back, Price, come back.
They keep fudding it down, and it's and I don't. Well, go ahead.
No, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, I was like, it's just the big picture thing. It makes it the thing that's hard is that it's kind of why I don't know if you saw my interview with Preston, where like at the end I like impromptu asked him about patriotism, and like I don't know if you caught that or not, but like it's like I love my country, I love it, and I want to be here forever. But it's like this weird situation everybody finds himself in. It's kind of that disorienting nature of what's been going on, and it's the realization that a lot of people have been lied to, and then so many things are built on lies, and so that is, I'm excited to see that, the truth went out. In the end, no matter what, truth does win out. And that's why I can sleep well at night, because I don't lie to people. If I say I'm going to do something a certain way, that's the way I do it, and live to the letter of the contract. You know what I mean? Like, I said this on Princey's podcast. I actually was on his podcast this morning.
Oh, nice.
But I said something about like, that, with contracts or whatever, like, it's funny if people can threaten all they want, like different things, but like if you don't lie, it's really easy. It's like life's not that stressful. It's pretty simple. And I also wonder, when did it become like morally acceptable for people to start lying at the scale that they do? I mean, it's like, it's obviously rampant, out of control. The money system's a lie, the media's a lie, the education's a lie, the food's a lie, and it's just like it's lying has infected every aspect of our existence, and it is one of the worst things you can do, is lie. Tell the truth. You can rest easy at night, no matter what. So yeah, well, dude, we could keep going and telling. There's so many. I can tell this is going to keep. We're going to have multiple of these, obviously, but maybe this is a good time to tell people. So, so we are kind of planning to be joint partners in the Bitcoin Made Simple? Is that what we're agreeing to?
Yeah, yeah. Let's do it live on air.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
we talk, so everybody knows we did talk about this,
yeah, we did.
before this, and this has been
Special
in the works
announcement.
for a little bit. Yeah, but I guess this
Yeah.
is the special bulletin. So basically, under the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast network, Luke and I will be partnering, and he will be doing once a week podcasts of his own show. Like, so if you're a subscriber and you'll get the episodes, and I will continue to the interviews I do will continue to be BMS and then the number. But Luke, what is your podcast titled?
Yeah, so I'm on YouTube at Fix the Money, Fix the World. It's only on YouTube at the moment. But I suppose, yeah, long term, I think we're all going to merge under the Bitcoin Made Simple kind of podcast banner. I think we've been talking about it for a little while now. We're both pretty flat out with our time. We both love podcasting. We both get an absolute kick out of podcasting others. I think we're going to do a weekly.
Yeah, and we'll do a weekly too. That's a
Yeah.
one that and that'll be, so that one is. Did we settle on that name? Are we gonna go with that name?
I like it. I like it. Yeah.
Okay,
Go for
so
it.
it'll be Bitcoin breadcrumbs. And that came out in like a space or a Twitter space or something, right? Somebody somehow we were talking and somebody said something about Bitcoin breadcrumbs. Maybe you were dropping some knowledge, but I think it's
Never.
like it's a good did you say never drop a knowledge?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bitcoin breadcrumbs, because basically be like a weekly, we'll just, Luke and I will sit down and shoot the breeze, talk about current events, things that happened in Bitcoin in the last week, and give you a little bit of the Australian and US bend on things.
I like it. Bit of a
and
crossover.
and yeah, that way, hopefully for all of you listeners, I mean, I think it'll be, you're getting 3 shows for the price of one.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
all under one, all under one roof, and I'm happy to be partnered with Luke, because it's going to be, Luke and I met over the internet like everybody meets nowadays, so
Yeah.
and he's a lot younger than me, so
Don't be silly. Don't be
yeah.
silly. Not much younger at all,
So
my
I'm like
friend.
this. I'm like the boomer of the
Of the show.
group. Yeah, of the
Yeah.
boomer, like the old curmudgeon. Like, I remember back in my day whenever we had cable channels and you turned the knob on the TV to change the TV channel.
I love
Yeah.
it. It's good.
So
I'm the out of control kid. You need to rein me in from time to time. So I
yeah,
think it'll be good fun. Hopefully the
yeah,
first of many, my friend. But yeah, I think I'm going to post this on my channel as well. So everybody listening to this on my channel on YouTube, make sure you go and subscribe to Bitcoin Made Simple podcast, because eventually we're probably going to transition everything to there and make it really seamless and do everything under the one banner. So
yeah. And if you guys, I mean, it's, we're supporting if you're supporting one show, you're supporting both of us, because we're gonna basically do this like a partnership, and try to build like a Bitcoin Made Simple podcast network, that would eventually, maybe even have more shows. I don't know. We're kind of winging it and figuring it out as we go here, because I don't think 2 years ago either of us thought we'd be in this podcasting world, but here we are. So yeah, well, Luke, tell people where they can find you outside of YouTube. You gave them that. If you want to give them that again, and then also on Twitter, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so YouTube, Fix the Money, Fix the World. It'll pop up. You'll see lots of photos with my big ugly mug in the thumbnail, so you'll be able to find me easily.
Don't lie. He's the best looking person in. I can say this heterosexually. He's the best looking person in Twitter. Maybe that would be our best way to. We could say that. The way we can announce it is like the best looking person in Bitcoin and Corey. Like,
definitely not, my friend. Definitely not. You take the cake. But yeah, so that's me on YouTube, the big mug on YouTube. And then Twitter, I think my name is it's my name, so it's Luke Mikic 21. My last name's a pain in the ass to spell, so you guys probably won't find me, but
Mikic.
Yeah, Mikic 21. That's me on Twitter. That's me on YouTube. Hopefully the first of many. I've had an absolute blast. I hope I didn't scare anyone going down the rabbit hole today, but all I can
it'll
say
be fun
is
too, because as we go, like, because I look at things and I'm like, I go there with like the rabbit hole and I'm like, okay, like I see all that. But then I also like to boil it down. I'm like, really, like what's most likely happening? And most likely, there's money involved and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I think we'll be like a good, like almost yin and yang. I mean,
yes,
I'll go
yes.
there with you, but I'll
Yeah.
also be like, you know what? Let me reel that back in a little bit.
Rein me back in. Rein me
Yeah.
back in. I need it. I do need it. I'm wild. I went a little bit. I ranted a little bit today. I don't normally get to do it when you're the podcaster. Like when I'm interviewing people, I'm normally reined in. I have to bite your tongue a little bit. But yeah, no, it's good fun today, my friend.
That's what the Bitcoin breadcrumbs will be. It'll be just Luke going off and me reining him in. So,
yeah.
But well, thanks everybody for listening, and thanks Luke for coming on. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me, my friend. It was an absolute blast, and hopefully the first of many.